June was a solid month of recruiting for Boston College football, but a few misses prevented it from being a great one.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I am your host, AJ Black. I'm the editor of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 network. Thank you for joining us. If you are looking for a daily Boston College podcast that is filled with analysis, news, and insight from someone who's covered the team for over a decade, you are in the right place. We've had this show going on for over 5 years. It's a daily free podcast you can get on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Now, we're going to get into basketball a little bit today. I'll tell you why I'm a little cautiously optimistic going into next season, which is weird for being a BC, covering BC. We're going to talk about Syracuse, who landed one of the biggest recruits in their school's history. Should BC start worrying about the Orange? And let's kick it off by talking about recruiting. As the month of June is now in the books, was this month a success for Boston College? I'll explain why it was, but it could have been a lot better. Let's get into that first. Now, June, starting on May 30th, the official visit season started in college football for most schools. Many schools had some other weeks that they were doing it too. BC, they stuck to their typical schedule. Now, they had over 30 recruits on campus in the month of June. They landed about 10 of them. And as I said before, do not do the statistics because some of those official visits were guys that were already here. There were some that didn't commit, but there were many that did commit, okay? So it's not a X's or apples and oranges type of thing. It is an apples and orange type of thing here where you can't just say the numbers don't line up. Now, you landed some recruits that I thought were very important for your class. Running back Cedric Allison. You had Femi Babalola. You also had a defensive tackle like Gavin Neal or offensive tackle Bruno Warner. Like, you got some really solid pieces here. But when you're evaluating this month, when you're evaluating the month of June, you could say it was successful because you brought in guys that you wanted to bring in and you landed many of them. However, you look at the fish that did not commit here, and you start to say, okay, it wasn't as good as you thought it might be. It could have been better. You know, the first name everyone's going to bring up is Marky Walbridge or Kai Pritchard. Two of the bigger fish on your plate, you weren't able to land either of them. One ended up at Michigan, one ended up at Illinois. That was a 4-star and one that'll probably be a 4-star. And you wanted both of them because obviously Walbridge is a local kid. You wanted to kind of, solidify that, just wasn't able to get it done. It happens, but it still stings, right? That's one big piece. You also had guys, the defensive tackle position specifically. There were multiple targets that they had listed coming for official visits that never even made it to campus or came to campus and then committed elsewhere. I look at guys like Amir Clark, who has not committed yet. He could change that. But then you look at the other names that of recruits that did not commit here, whether it was Alex Willis, who had a good visit to BC and had a good relationship. He ends up at Georgia Tech. You had Carmelo McKenzie, who committed before he even got a chance to come to campus. He ended up at NC State. And Jermaine Poku, they did a great job of getting in on him early. Rutgers out of nowhere comes in. They make an offer after he canceled a visit. I think it was to Wisconsin. Rutgers gets on his schedule and boom, they land him. So that's like 3 defensive tackles that you would have loved to get. And that's not a knock on Gavin Neal, but those 3 would have been, one of those 3 would have been nice, and you weren't able to land any of them. And you look at some other positions too. Yeah, there may have been a guy here or there that you're hoping for, but I think overall, they did a lot of what you wanted, right? The class itself, the majority of the guys that you wanted to bring in were committed ahead of time. Whether it's the local kids, you had your Brady Beckenhuis, Dean Roxnitis, Matt Fitzgerald, Dom Funk. They were all committed way in advance, right? You had them in advance. You had DJ Bordeaux, your quarterback, Tex Vaughn, your tight end. Like you had guys, a couple wide receivers. You had a couple guys that you already had. You only had to do so much for this official visit season. And honestly, I look at who they missed on, and positional wise, secondary, I really don't think they missed on anyone that really was like super high on their depth, on their groupings, because they ended up, grabbing a couple really good recruits, and I think they ended up working out fine. Linebacker, yes, a miss. Rocky Cummings, they missed him. Jaden Williams missed him. So a couple misses there. Defensive edge rush, that's the big one right now. Can they land Carter Gooden? Because that changes this whole complexion of everything we're talking about here. Will they be able to close it on him? That would change that. And you already had your other edge rushers, Mason Leak and Dom Funk there. Defensive tackle, we talked about it. Offensive line, you missed on the two I mentioned, but you brought in Bruno Warner and you brought in Lawrence Ayale Cooley. I'm sorry if I messed up his name. So kind of 50-50 there. Quarterback, you landed it. Running back, you landed it. Wide receiver, Nyquir Helton, that was your top guy all along. You landed him. So again, you had your hits and misses, and that's kind of what college football recruiting is all about. You had guys that you really targeted, you wanted, and you did get many of them. Some of them you didn't. And you're going to have to keep getting better. And you know what changes all that? It's not NIL. It's not money and all that good stuff. It can be that sometimes. It's winning football games. And that's what BC's going to have to do to change that complexion. Look at Syracuse. We'll talk about them in a minute. They won 10, 11 games last year. Now all of a sudden they're off to the races. BC needs to have a season like that. They need to get 8, 9 wins. They have to. And that'll change the complexion. High school kids will pay attention to that. And with revenue sharing and all that, that'll help. Okay. You will never be Texas Tech right now with that oil money, but you will be able to get guys you want here, and that should change things. Okay. So clearly all this, the way that we look at this is all going to change if Carter Gooden commits. The edge rusher from Tabor Academy. Yes, I've talked about him a bunch, but you add him to what you brought in, and all of a sudden the complexion of your class changes. You have your crown jewel, you have a big name, and then everything else kind of just slides into place. You lose out on him, you're again looking at another guy that you lost out on. So this is a very critical recruitment. And right now, from what I've heard, it sounds like it's BC and UCLA. Not a battle you can't win, but it's going to be a tough one. We'll have to wait to see what happens there. In a moment, talking recruiting, one of BC's biggest rivals landed a program-changing commitment. I've been hard on Fran Brown, but he's done it again, and I'll explain what this means to BC in just a moment. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with a family or friends? Maybe it's the game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. It's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it all possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Price on the app actually drop closer to get to first pitch. I'll tell you, I wanted to go to the Woo Sox a couple weeks ago. I had some friends that were coming in. I need to get tickets for everybody. Game Time was the only place I could find to get us all in. The prices were very good, lower than any place else I could find. And I got all our family and friends in. We had a great time. And then with their exclusive zone deals for FIFA Club World Cup matchups, you got soccer deals going on too. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. This is Locked On Boston College. I am your host, AJ Black. I hope everyone out there had a great 4th of July. I did. If you couldn't tell from some of my posts, I was up in New Hampshire enjoying myself. But football it was a crazy weekend for football recruiting again. Not for BC. Things were quiet for BC, but some of their rivals had a big weekend. None bigger than Syracuse. Fran Brown, in his second year as head coach of the Syracuse Orange, landed his biggest recruit, and I believe it's the biggest recruit Syracuse has ever landed. Calvin Russell, a wide receiver from Florida, a 5-star ranked number 20 in the entire class of 2026, committed to Syracuse over offers from basically every blue blood you can consider. I'll go to the Q's Nation one because they just listed Florida State, Michigan, Oregon, Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisville, LSU, Maryland, Miami, Mississippi State, Nebraska, North Carolina, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Penn State, Pitt, Purdue, SMU, Tennessee, Texas A&M, UCF, USF, USC, Wisconsin, and others. Whew, that's a list they got there. Well, why is this kid so good? He's 6'5", and he not only is he big, but he is a lethal athlete. He's not just going to Syracuse to play football. He's going to play football and basketball. So he's an athlete that can jump like a basketball player and play wide receiver at 6'5". This was huge news. You heard Syracuse's name buzzing around a 5-star recruit, and you got skeptical. Because, the other names that you were hearing as finalists were Michigan, Miami. Like, you were figuring, like, this kid's going to go there. And then he ends up picking Syracuse. And, yes, I think NIL is going to be a big deal with this one, or rev sharing. They're going to give him a good chunk to go there. But is this the new norm? Right? Like, Fran Brown clearly valued this kid and is going to pay him like they value him, which is the new norm in college football. But will BC be able to handle this kind of stuff? BC's always a step behind, it feels like. But you just heard about Texas Tech. Texas Tech with Felix Ojo, or I think that's how you say his name, 5-star offensive tackle. He chose Texas Tech over every other blue blood you can think of because of the rev sharing. Schools are starting to figure out that, they're going to put a little extra money towards, it's like free agency again in a different way. Pay you a little more. I heard Ojo was like $1.8 million over 3 years for a kid that's never played at the college level. That's what's happening now. So Syracuse is willing to do this. They've already shown that they'll go into the transfer portal and bring in guys. I mean, whether it is Kyle McCord, who set the NCAA record last year with yards thrown. You brought in Jonte Cook from Washington and Texas, a former 5-star. They're willing to do that. Will Syracuse, supersede BC and jump them because of the talent gap that they're going to try to create? That's something worth watching. Now, I told you I'm selling. I got to own it. I'll sell. I said last year I didn't believe that Kyle McCord was going to do anything, and I was wrong there. But guys like Jonte Cook, they brought in a couple other guys that are all like, they've got some interesting paths. But Fran Brown is not afraid to go out there and do those things. And he, as much as some of the things he does seems to me like Dion Light, I look at Fran and he's doing the right things at Syracuse to push them up to that next level. Now, you look at the difference in recruiting right now between Syracuse and BC, and it's not that far off. Like before that 5-star, BC was right there with them. So this is where Carter Gooden comes in, right? Like if BC can land Carter Gooden, that gap is not that bad. Like, yeah, they got a 5-star, but BC has a high 4-star to go with it. So that gap has to happen. But I honestly wonder, and BC's never going to tell you because they're a private school. They are a school that, doesn't release information unless they have to. Like, you don't hear a lot about the money piece. Would BC do something similar to what Syracuse did for Calvin Russell to get Carter Gooden here? I would think that if you heard this story, you need to be able to think that you're to yourself, this is what we have to do. This is the new normal. If we don't want to get dragged for years because we're not adjusting to the new system out there, we need to be able to do things like this too. And there's no better person to do this with than Carter Gooden. It's a position you lack on your roster. He's a local-ish because he's not from here, but he went to Tabor Academy. He's ranked higher than anyone you've landed in decades. Yes, it's different than what you've been doing, but if you're doing rev share, pay him. Make it easy for him to pick BC. Make it an easy choice that, UCLA is going to pay me, but I get good NFL coaching. Like, yeah, compared to Deshaun Foster and Bill O'Brien in coaching. Yeah, Deshaun Foster hasn't coached at all. And you got Bill O'Brien, so you get that piece. But, yeah, money's going to – Carter Gooden keeps saying it doesn't mean that much to him, but I'm sure it does a little bit. So make it juicy for them. Use this new system to do this. You have to spend the money anyways. Might as well do it to benefit your program. So this is something, and again, they're not going to talk to us about how they're doing it. It's all going to be smoke and mirrors that we're never going to hear about. But I'm just thinking to myself, BC can do this too. There's no reason BC can't do what Syracuse just did, what Texas Tech just did. Okay? They don't have to do it to the level Texas Tech does because Texas Tech is just going to start dumping money on everything. I mean, look at was it softball or baseball? They just bought like the best player in the country. I think it was softball. Like they oil money's nuts. But I'm saying that there's other ways you can do this to put yourself at a more advantageous position. I think BC could do that too. But right now, I mean, Syracuse is getting all the eyeballs. Fran Brown goes out there and he does things like this. And it gives his school positive attention. BC needs to get that attention too. They need to figure out how to get, it's great to get some of these, developmental kids, but you also need to splash every now and then to catch the attention of other recruits that say, hey, I can do that too. In a moment, I want to switch things up. I haven't talked about basketball in a while, but I started writing some previews and reading about BC, and I'm kind of oddly optimistic about them. I'll tell you what I mean about all that and why I'm feeling this way and why I'm a fool in just a moment. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black. And to all my everydayers out there, we are a 5-day-a-week podcast. You guys have been all listening to us 5 days a week, continuing on. We're getting into the meat of the dragging on of the offseason is slowing down. And if you want your first listen to be about college football, you are in the right spot. I'm telling you right now. And if you want another one, check out Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin. He talks everything college football going on right now, and there's tons of stuff going on you're going to want to hear about. So check that out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, let's get into basketball. Yeah. If you've listened to this show, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to lift the curtain just a little bit here. Whenever I talk about basketball, my numbers drop. And I never lead with basketball because that is just the death of my podcast. Like I can't do that because no one listens. Like even if it's a big win, no one wants to listen to it. So I always have to have it later in the show. I sneak it in. And I'm going to sneak it in here because I've been thinking about this roster. And what BC has this year going into a absolutely critical year for Earl Grant. This is a make or break year for Earl Grant because he does not show improvement. You got to imagine Blake James is going to move on after this year. He's had his chances, and the best in what is it going to be 4 or 5 years. If the best that he can do is make the NIT once, I think it's time to try something different. But I want to give Earl Grant credit for one. I think he did a pretty solid job in the transfer portal. Now you lost players, and I look at who they lost, and I say, not a big deal this year. It's nothing like the year before. You lost. Elijah Strong is easily the biggest one you lost, but I still think he was not the best player, and he wasn't absolutely critical to your roster. He did some nice things here and there, but he's replaceable. You can get guys that can do what he can do. You lost Chaz Kelly, who had no business being in the on the lineup. Nice guy, he had a moment here or there. He had a game-winning shot, but he just was not capable of being a starting point guard, and he left. Josh Beadle, same thing. Like, another guy that just he did not look like any reason like that he should have been in this on that team doing anything for your team going forward. He, good luck. He's at Coastal Carolina, and then Deion Brown, who was a big disappointment. Like this was a guy you brought in to really be your point scorer to go along with the Donald Hand, and he just looked like the skill talent. Get a jump from UMBC to BC was big for him, so he's off too. So you brought in guys, and what stands out to me about this transfer portal class, and it's not just the transfer portal class, it's the freshmen coming in, is the athleticism. Aiden Shaw. This is a kid that played for Missouri, Dennis Gates, and had a lot of talent around him. They were really good a couple years ago. He is as athletic as they come. And that's something I feel like this team desperately needs. And it's the theme going through this transfer portal class. He could be a very good role player for you next year. But it's not role players that the team needs. They need stars. Jason Asamoah, kid from Lynn, Massachusetts, played at Baylor last year, got buried by, I forget who the starter was over him. Never really got a chance to play. But we're talking about, Syracuse getting former 5-stars. Asamoah was literally right outside of a 5-star recruit. Just, you look at all the offers he had. This kid right here, athleticism a huge plus, good scorer, good, a physical player. Like if BC taps into what he could become, they have something here. To put him out there with Fred Payne and Donald Hand and probably Jaden Hastings, you got something there. Because then the third piece that really is critical is Chase Forte. Now Chase is from South Dakota State. He is a defensive-minded point guard. Love it. I look at him and I say defensive-minded point guard. Give me what you had a couple years ago with Jaden Zachary. Like Jaden Zachary, you missed him so much last year. Like we really took him took advantage of took him for granted. Excuse me, couldn't get the words out there. So, you got Chase Forte, who did a ton for South Dakota State. This kid does not look like a Deion Brown, like that's going to bump up and then get overwhelmed. I think he's got it in him. Like this kid's a dog, and I think he's going to be a really good addition. So look at just them. You added in Bodden Kapke, a center from Butler who again had some spots, and then you have some freshmen that I think are really interesting. Akbar Wahid and Caleb Sturger are two that I'm really interested. You got a wing and a guard. Could they really play a big role? So you got all these guys that are coming in, and there's talent that is that if they can tap it, will make this team better. Now, if this team just falls on their face again, it doesn't work. You blow the whole thing up. But there's a chance. There's a chance here. And I'm being optimistic, and I don't know why. This team could do some fun things this year. Will they be a tournament team? I don't think so. I don't think they're. I mean, the ACC's having trouble enough with some really, really deep teams, and BC's not going to be there. But could they surprise some teams and not really be the punching bag of the ACC? Could happen. It really could. Donald Hand is really, really good. Fred Payne, he's going to get his chance to finally get out there and be that guy. And I think Jaden Hastings, one thing on Earl Grant that he does really well is develop big men between Quinton Post and James Karnick and and TJ Bickerstaff. Like he's done a nice job of developing bigs. If he can develop Jaden Hastings, and if it may be Jaden Hastings and Kopke, you got something there. So that is why I'm thinking, like, it doesn't feel so doom and gloom like last year. It feels like there's potential here, and maybe I'm being optimistic, and maybe it's not going to work, and maybe the coaching style of Earl Grant is just not the right fit. But it's worth watching. I think that's the end point here is things could go well, and it could be a fun team to watch. And at the end of the day, Isn't that all we're asking for? Well, wins too, but that's all we got to say there. Well, thank you all for listening. My name's AJ Black. You can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. Check out my work at Eagle Insider. If you haven't subscribed over there, please do. If you have not already subscribed on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, make yourself an everydayer. Listen to us 5 days a week. We have BC News for 25 minutes. Get all your news, all your analysis, and you'll surprise your other alumni with how much you know about BC if you check out our podcast. Thank you all, and I'll see you all again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Boston College. Your team every day.